In this video, we're going to be looking at UV mapping, and so right now I have, instead of my node editor down here, I have the UV image editor, and this is of course what pops up whenever you do a render. In fact, if I go over here and I hit F12 to start rendering, it'll replace that screen with an active render of my scene from the camera's point of view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and escape, and so we don't have to worry about that all rendering out. And escape again one more time, maybe. So when I first opened up this window, I actually had this render result here. I can also see my drawings as I go through. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to that render result. I'm going to hit this little X so it goes away, so I don't have anything selected at the moment. I could do new, or I could open up an image to put in for part of my texture mapping and figuring it out. But what I'm going to do is, and I can also create a map from this that I can put into export as an image, and then I can use that for outlines for actually drawing the way I want the textures to look on the surface. So what I'm going to do is, on my fish here, you can see it's spread out the parts, and you want to, in the shading mode, I'm going to make this large again in just a moment, but so I can see all my menus here. In shading, we want to make sure, first of all, we recalculate the surfaces so that they're all good. This mark seam, if I go in here and I switch to edge mode, and let's say I want my fish divided down the middle, I could do that by holding Alt, clicking on those edge loops, and I could use those to kind of select that all the way down. And if I want to divide it in the middle, I could say mark seam. And then anywhere else where I want to mark seams, for instance, if I do Alt here and around that, do this side too, and then I'll go ahead and select those there like that. I could say mark seam. And when we unwrap the sides of the fish, the net, as we could call it, then what you end up with is you can see much better how your fish texture is going to look, or how it should separate in parts. So I'm going to do Alt around this, and Alt, and select around that as well. I'm going to go ahead and do Alt there to select around that edge, and Alt here at the top, select around that side, going around the top. I'll go ahead and do the tip here as well, and I'll do that. So I got those. I'm going to go ahead and do mark seam. Now I've split it up into those sections, and what I can do is go to where it says unwrap, and simply just clicking unwrap will unfold parts. Like, let me go ahead and hit that one, and I actually don't see anything generated from that. So we're going to have to calculate the UVs in some way here. So I'm going to go back down to my unwrap section. I can do smart project. I can also do different types of projections. So for instance, if I do cylinder projection, and then I do go over here and I say unwrap, and I still don't see anything. I go to smart UV project, say OK. Oh, I know why I don't see anything when I do that. I'm going to go ahead and go back to where it said, I'm going to do A, and I'm going to go to face select. I'm going to select everything. That's why I didn't see anything there, is because of the way that I didn't have those selected. So like any face on here that I have selected, it'll show me what that looks like. Okay. If I do Control A, or actually just AA to select everything, then I can see these maps and how they're selected. this took off like the little parts going there. And I think that's part of that fin on that side. And looks like I have underneath, I'm missing a few parts there, and that's again part of that underneath fin. So something like the fish, a little bit harder to do and figure out the way that you want it. But for instance, if I take a section here and then with these selected, I can, or in this map, I can do L to select just that part. And this is the other side of the fish, so actually maybe I want to deselect, hit A, L on this one to select it. And I just want to show you how this works. If I hit R and I start to rotate, you can see the texture rotating on the fish as I go around it and how it kind of affects it there. This part here that's not moving is that part right there. So if I wanted to, I'm going to undo my rotation there. And what I could do is I could try to make sure that these are part of that same section or mapped the same way. I could add more seams, like I could add a seam there and there if I want. You could play around with it quite a bit. But going back to this, the net of it, I guess you could say, is if I scale this up, I'll create a texture where it's more on one side, in this case, there we go, than on the other. And if I scale it way down, like so, now that side's much bigger than that side. And so you can play around with how those look. If I rotate it like this, let's say I want to do 180, so it's like so, and excuse me, let's say I scale it up so it's roughly the same size as what it was before I scale it down. I could actually make this so it's a mirror image of the other one by flipping those over and stuff. So I could even do S, and instead of just scaling it like that, I could do negative 1. Actually, that's interesting because it flipped it that way. I want to do U, or do I want to do V? V? To play around with that. So I'm going to do escape, and we could try that again, or we do S, I'm going in this direction. So actually, I guess I'd type X. So I'd say X, I want to scale only in the X direction. I can do -1, enter. That's overlapping this one. If I hit G, I could put this right on top of the other net so that those textures actually mirror each other on both sides. So I have the stripes there and the stripes there, like that. So you can play around with lots of ways. You don't have to, of course, make them mirror. Sometimes that's very useful and beneficial. So some different ways of playing with it. If I were doing this as kind of a final project or something that I wanted to make look absolutely fantastic, I would spend a lot more time getting the net to work the way that I want. I might actually use an imported texture. I might also see if there's a way of displaying what the generated or procedural texture looks like on that screen. And so there's, again, lots of features here. There's grease pencil options over here usually. Although, actually, with this selected, I get the mirroring features here, which is kind of cool. Some other tools, haven't played around with these at all, and so it can be kind of a fun way to try that. You can, where it says UV down here, you can go to some of the options in here where there's even a way of exporting the UV UV export UV layout right there. So if I were to click that and do export, I can give it a file name, and it's going to save it as a PNG. And then if you open it up in another program, it's going to look, it's going to show you the net. Let me go ahead and show you kind of what that looks like. I'll pause this for a moment. So in this section here, what I've done is I found the file that I saved just a moment ago. I'm going to go ahead and say open. And here is my map. It's a little bit larger than it is. I can always scale that up and then scale down the texture and the thing depending on how much detail I want. And I can see the outlines for my textures. Here I have two of the nets overlapped, and you can see I didn't quite get them overlapped exactly, which I would take more time to do, of course, if I were doing a more thorough job on this, and also getting the other nets to the size that I would want. So anyway, that's a little bit how you can start doing texture mapping. In our next video tutorial series, we'll do a little bit more with that, as well as bump mapping and some of those other features. And so that's it for this one.